Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today I wanted to talk about ICP because there's been something pretty interesting going on within the ICP ecosystem, and there's been a particular development with this bob.fun that could be potentially ICP's like Solana moment, right? And so definitely pretty interesting and possibly exciting news. And so I wanted to go on ahead and talk about that today. So let's go on ahead and dive right in. But starting out, before we get into the whole ICP situation, I want to go over crypto bubbles just so we can see kind of where we're at. So obviously today everything is red, other than ICP and Aave are kind of the only two of note that are up any sort of meaningful amount. I guess we could maybe throw Tau in, which is about up 1%, but everything else down a pretty decent amount. I would say this is something that's not too concerning, just given the fact that we have had several days of pretty good positive motion. So this is just kind of a little bit of a pullback. Again, the market still is in a pretty indecisive state. So, I don't expect that we're going to see anything too crazy one direction or the other, at least until we start to get a better sense on where the market is going. And frankly, I don't really think that's going to happen until after the election, if I had to be completely honest. But obviously anything could happen. This is not financial advice because I know just as little as you guys do as far as what's going to happen, within the market. So, but moving on, one thing that we can look toward, and one thing that I try to look toward pretty consistently, is the liquidation map, because the liquidation map I think is a pretty good indicator of where things have gone, at least historically. It's been pretty decent, at least zooming out from looking at things from a longer term perspective. So obviously what we can see is with the pullback happening, obviously we're definitely tilted towards liquidating shorts again, which would indicate a move to the upside. However, as I mentioned before on the channel, the thing that I really prefer to see is confluence between all three, and as we can see, that is not the case, because the 7-day is showing actually currently a bias toward long liquidations, which would indicate a move to the downside, and then 30 days is still very, very much favored towards liquidating shorts. But like I said, we are seeing kind of a split between the different time frames. Obviously, two of them are indicating a move up, and then one of them is indicating a move down, which it isn't awesome. Usually, like I've said before, I like to see kind of confluence between all three before I'm making any sort of crazy trade or whatever. So I want to go check out the charts real quick. And here we can see, as I mentioned before, I'm doing all of my charting through Margex just because this is a leveraged exchange. I have been taking some trades over the past couple weeks. I've done relatively well in this recent kind of market pullback. I closed most of my positions to the upside about this area, I believe. And since then, obviously, I was way too early on that, just since we saw that. But that's okay. Obviously, don't try and revenge trade or do anything that is going to lose you a lot of money. So right now I'm just kind of trying to wait for things to resolve. Right now looks like possibly a time where I'm considering going in on the upside, just because we are sitting kind of at a pretty decent level of support. However, ideally, we are on hour-long candles right now. Ideally, I'd be looking to kind of see this kind of bounce around a little bit in this area before I take a position, because with the momentum that we've seen to the downside, it is highly possible that we continue moving down to kind of where we were seeing earlier over the weekend. So that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. Again, I'm not getting too crazy with anything right now, just because I don't want to. I don't want this to crash right through the support and then get liquidated. So I'm just kind of sitting on my hands at this point. No open trades, nothing really too crazy going on. I did also want to check out the ICP chart, because what we can see here is ICP did make this massive run up. They hit actually past this most recent point of resistance, broke through that, and then it's since kind of come down, potentially maybe looking to find a little bit of support on this line. If not, potentially we could be falling back into the sub $8 range, maybe just right at $8 as well. This is kind of this whole zone right here seems to be kind of a liquidity zone. So I would say anything within this 795 ish to 805 range, I would say is probably a good liquidity zone that ICP could potentially find support if it doesn't at this level. Again, it's hard to say for sure. We are going to talk about what led to this run up, but obviously we can see we broke the downward trend, as most things did, and then it just went nuts. And this is largely attributed to bob.fun, which is coming up here in a second. So before we get into that though, if you are interested in trading on Margex, they do allow leverage trading, no KYC, no VPN. You can trade ICP up to 25x leverage, Bitcoin, Ethereum up to 100, and then many others up to about 50x leverage. So it is a really nice exchange if you are going to be doing leverage trading anyway. Again, as I say pretty much every time I bring up Margex, this is a very, very dangerous time to be trading. We are essentially trading on hard mode. It is still possible to make money and do particularly well if you have a pretty good read on the market and you're patient. Over trading, I think, is what kills like 90% of people's profits. I fall victim to this sometimes as well, but being patient and being careful is like the number one thing that you can do. So, but if you're interested, I have a link below. Feel free to get signed up. They are doing up to $10,000 in deposit bonuses, as well as they are still underway with their $500,000 Casper airdrop. So if that's interesting to you, feel free, go ahead and sign up and just get started and see if you like it or not. So moving on, what I want to talk about is kind of what's led to this positive price action within ICP, right? And honestly, it's pretty bullish overall. So if we look, this is the cycle burn rate. And so essentially how ICP works is it has a mint and burn mechanism, very similar to Ethereum for those of you who are familiar with Ethereum. So essentially what happens is every time nodes like mine these blocks as part of the blockchain, they receive rewards. But also, similar to the internet, developers need to essentially like host domain space, right, from ICP. And so they call this a reverse gas model. And the reverse gas model essentially means that if I have developed an app, or a DApp in this case, then I would need to be the one to essentially pay for the cycles, which is essentially like compute, essentially. And so I would need to be the one to pay for the cycles to run my app. So I personally would need to be the one that like supports the like active ongoing hosting of my website, which is almost exactly like the internet, right? Where currently in crypto, if you want to do something on an app, you need to pay for it. And that's part of what makes Web3 so unwieldy right now, is because you have to basically sign everything that you do. And it makes it very unwieldy and kind of a pain in that respect. Where on ICP, you don't need to do that because the developer essentially is prepaid for all of this compute up front already. And what that functions as is a sense of cycle burn rate. And the cycle burn rate is essentially indicating the health of the network. And theoretically, if the cycle burn rate got high enough, ICP could in fact become a deflationary token, which for its own obvious reasons, I think, makes a lot of ICP holders fairly bullish. But what we can see over the past month is, we were sitting at, 10 billion cycles per second. And now recently we've gone up, 100x to 1.4 trillion cycles per second, which is just absolutely insane. I mean, obviously we can see this, it's like a J curve going on. And so this is like ridiculous in terms of just like showing use on the network and popularity on the network as well. And so this is what I would consider, possibly ICP's potential Solana moment, right? There's been an app that's been developed on the ICP network. It's apparently found very widespread adoption, or at least hype so far. We'll see how long this goes. But what it's done is it's actually, very healthily impacting the network, which is great. And so cycle burn rate is something where, there's a lot of projects that try and artificially, pump positive metrics within their system so people like get all excited, right? But this is kind of like bob.fun on Solana. This just kind of came out, people found it really interesting, and it's doing wonders for the network, at least at this current point in time. Again, this could be a flash in the pan, and it may not last more than a couple weeks or maybe even a couple days, who knows, right? But this is something that is in fact pretty interesting and definitely good news for the network overall. So moving on, we're going to talk about what is causing this, and this is bob.fun. Now bob.fun is kind of interesting because Bob stands for blockchain on blockchain, and essentially what they're doing is they're trying to build Bitcoin, like essentially a combination of Bitcoin and Doge on ICP, which is really, really interesting. And so what we can see is, here's the current price of Bob. We can see the current price or the current number of miners within the system, and then also the number of blocks mined, as well as the number of active miners. Now we'll get into this in a second, but essentially what Bob is it it runs like a virtual Bitcoin, right? So what we can do is we can go in and we can actually buy miners on the ICP system, and then we can have it use cycles. So you can either do 2 trillion up to 14 trillion cycles per day per miner that you have. And a cycle essentially is like an attempt, right? As far as like Bitcoin is concerned. And so what you do is you essentially are trying to mine a block, and each block that you mine is worth 600 bob. So at this point, you know, that's what, $750 close to it at this point. So a decent chunk of money, and each node or each miner costs 1 ICP, so about $8, right? And then plus it costs about, I think it's about $1 per trillion cycles. So another potentially, you know, $14 per day to run your miner. So overall, you know, you're looking at, if you were to run this for one day, $22. And if you mine a block within that day, you're potentially making 750, a pretty decent return, right? And that's why people have been so eager to rush into creating miners. And that's why the cycle burn rate has gone up so much on the ICP system. Now, again, keep in mind, Bob is a meme coin. There's been no announcements or anything as this any sort of utility, usefulness, value, any sort of like thing like that on Bob. But obviously, you know, the price is holding up relatively well. So it is like Bitcoin. It will essentially asymptotically inflate over time. So obviously a ton of Bob is being minted into the system right now. And then as time goes on, it will continue to, you know, the rate at which it inflates will continue to decrease. There is only going to be 21 million Bob. We can see the halving is every 17,500 blocks. And a halving is expected essentially every 3 months-ish, just less than that. We can see here, you know, costs and speed. I guess my picture's blocking it. But if you want to check out the website, you can see it's bob.fun. And it's something that, you know, it's kind of sitting in an interesting point, or an interesting kind of crossroads within the crypto system, right? Because it's a meme coin. Meme coins obviously have done very, very well this cycle. It kind of has some notions of Bitcoin, but you don't actually have to pay, you know, $10,000 for a Bitcoin miner or anything like that. It's 1 ICP, and then it's just the cost to upkeep that. And you have I won't call it gambling, but it definitely has notes of gambling in the sense that, you know, you could, even though there's 15,000 miners and currently 3,700 active miners, only one gets to mine the block, right? And so if you have a miner, you have a chance at which you could come out with, you know, $750 on a $22 investment of one day, right? Obviously that investment gets larger totally, but smaller as like a per day basis the more you do it. But it is pretty interesting kind of looking at this and how it's developing so far. Obviously it's led to a ton of organic, you know, growth and usage within the ICP ecosystem, which is really good because it's burning a ton of ICP, and the rate of inflation for ICP overall is definitely coming down quite a lot. Also, just going back to the chart real quick, we can see this level of price increase, particularly yesterday. This was very much attributed to people trying to rush in to buy ICP to build a lot of miners. If we look at the leaderboard, we have, you know, 92 miners, 49 miners, 18 miners. Like there's a lot of people that we can see that are mining here. And we can also see on each block that gets minted, obviously, you know, they're all giving 600 bob. This is when they were mined. So I would imagine we should be seeing a new block mined here shortly. And then we can also see the total cycles burned: 111 trillion, 119 trillion, 134 trillion. So there's obviously a lot of, you know, volume being pushed through this so far. So this is something that I've been finding really interesting, that I definitely think is worth monitoring as things continue to unfold, because, you know, like I said, Bob's a meme coin, so I have absolutely no idea how long this will last. Meme coins generally are only as valuable as the community that supports them. I know ICP's community is very, very strong, so I do think it's a possibility that this does continue to run. But again, you know, we always have to remember that we never know for sure. But this does look to be like a pretty interesting idea that I do think actually, if we were later on in the cycle, would absolutely blow up. Since we are still early on in the cycle and we haven't seen some of the retail come back, we haven't seen some of the kind of ridiculous speculation and things like that going on in the market, it's hard for me to say exactly, you know, how long this will run. But I mean, if something like this were to come around in, you know, late mid to late 2021, I would say, I mean, I think this would have just kind of taken the entire crypto space by storm. So again, we'll have to see kind of how it develops and things like that. But ultimately, hopefully you found this information useful and at least a little bit insightful as far as some of the developments within the ICP system. Regardless of what you think about bob.fun generally, it is indisputable that it is bringing a lot of eyes to the ICP system, which I do think is really good overall. So that's something that we definitely should always be mindful of, as well as, that this is an interesting experiment that could lead to more Bob forks potentially, right? So it's really interesting. Like I said, if you did find this video useful, please do give me a like and subscribe. It really does help me out. Also, it does help me in the YouTube algorithm, push me to more people that could potentially see this and learn more about ICP and what's going on within their ecosystem. Also, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, please drop me a comment. I do read and respond to all of my comments. So if you have anything that you want me to see or just want to engage with me, please leave me a comment. That is the best way to do that. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.